we need to talk about streamer mode. Streamer mode is a high elo issue, but bear with me because this is getting really bad, right? I predicted in the patch notes video that soloq might feel like a desolate co-op versus AI landscape where you didn't know who anyone was, and it was just kind of a mess. And unfortunately, that is starting to become reality. So I played a game not in Challenger, not in Grandmaster, but in Master, where 6 out of the 10 people, and really, if I exclude myself because I know who I am, 6 out of the 9 people in the game were using this streamer mode to be completely anonymous. So when I load into game and I'm playing against my old friends Viego, Oriana, Lucian, and Morgana, and I can see one person on the enemy team, it feels a little bit desolate, lonely, the antithesis of what is fun about playing in high elo solo queue, where you get to know who the people are, you get to know about them and their champions and their play style and stuff like that, where people develop a reputation for being a good or a bad player and for having a good mentality or a negative mentality, whether they're toxic or not. All of that is completely out the window with this last change to streamer mode, because now I don't know who anybody is. And so it feels like I'm playing a co-op versus AI game. So for that reason, I feel like to protect a small minority of high elo players who are streamers, we are, and not to protect them completely, by the way, because stream sniping and ghosting, as we'll get into, can still happen very easily. Despite that, for the vast majority of other high elo players, it just feels like we're ruining the experience of playing in high elo solo queue, and it feels like we're playing a co-op versus AI game. And this is only going to get worse because, as you can see here, people don't show up on the op.gg live search feature, and they're not supposed to show up on other sites as well. This took a little while for them to roll out, so I think it wasn't quite working at first. There may have been a period of time where op.gg just completely removed the live search feature while they worked on changing it. But what Riot ultimately wanted, and they did say this in the patch notes on streamer mode, is that if you turn streamer mode on, you will not even show up in the search feature on op.gg for the live game. So in this case, I just, it's like 7 in the morning, so I pulled some random player off of my friends list. This is even in a plat game. There is one person who is using streamer mode, and because they're using streamer mode, this person just doesn't show up on the live game feature at all. So even once you get into loading screen and in game, there's absolutely no way to figure out who this person is. Which means if you're a high elo player, you often use this information to look up like, hey, is my AD carry filled and I should play a little bit safer in lane? Hey, is my support filled and I should play a little bit safer in lane? If I'm a jungler, is the enemy jungler filled and I should invade them a bunch and get really far ahead? Or, is there somebody who's on a 10-game losing streak who's tilted who I could camp and stuff like that? Or is there someone on the other team who's auto-filled who I can camp, or maybe I don't have to worry about their lane and I can focus on helping another lane? There is a lot of information to be gained that high elo players will use from looking up the live game really quickly at the start of a game or when they're in loading screen to try to get a little bit of information about the game. I don't really min-max all of this. I just try to figure out, is my AD carry going to be half decent or not, so that I can know whether I can play to my full strengths and play aggressive, or whether I should play a little bit more safe. So obviously I'm just looking at like whether my AD carry is filled or not. Now you could argue about whether this is a good thing or a bad thing, but my main point with this is that there's an obvious incentive for you to turn streamer mode on, because by turning streamer mode on, none of this information can be used against you. If you're filled, it won't tilt your teammates or change the way that they're going to play. If the enemy team is going to play around you differently because you're filled, they can't see that information using this either. If maybe you're worried that you're going to pick a champion that you're not as used to playing, or want to play a role that you're not as used to playing, and you're worried that your teammates are going to get frustrated about that, you can turn streamer mode on and they won't be able to know, things like that. So basically the point is that there's a heavy incentive for people who aren't streamers to turn streamer mode on in high elo to get a certain advantage or edge in every single one of their games, which is why we're seeing more and more people turn it on Even people who, I'm thinking about turning it on, and I hate the concept of everyone being anonymous like this because I think it ruins the high elo solo queue experience, which is what I said when they rolled it out. So the other issue with this, is that people develop a reputation in solo queue for being a good or a bad player and for being a toxic player or a, whatever average, not toxic high elo player. And that reputation is really important to the tier 2 amateur scene because players will have an opinion from the players that they've played with and against in solo queue on whether they think this guy is really good or whether they think this guy is really bad, or whether they're willing to play or want to play with this guy as a teammate, or whether they think that it's not a good idea. And I think it's rather important for not just tier 2, but even for professional play. There have been many times in years past, Doublelift's talked about it in his personal experience, where he's said, this guy is really good in solo queue. Let's try him out. Or let's, this guy's really good in solo queue and he's not toxic, not super toxic. Let's try him out. And then, this person ends up trying out for a team and maybe getting onto the team. I feel like one of the major issues with this change is it's going to make people more toxic because people are somewhat anonymous. They're adding an extra level of anonymity that's not really healthy. So one of the reasons why people feel like there's so much toxicity in League in general is because they're playing on this random League account with this kind of anonymous name compared to their real name. But when you also consider that in high elo, even your username is associated with you as a person and can develop a reputation, it sort of becomes not anonymous anymore. Because if you're Doublelift or if you're BenTbeyondrepair, well, not me to as much of an extent as Doublelift or somebody, right? But if you're, Tyler1 or you're BenTbeyondrepair, or you're Doublelift, and people associate your username with a person and with an attitude that person has, then you have to realize that you're not completely anonymous anymore, because once you get to high elo and start playing with the same people over again, your reputation is going to carry with you. And it encourages people to maybe be a little bit less toxic. For others, maybe not. Maybe they build a brand out of being super toxic, Tarzan. But, Tarzan, not... Anyways, whatever. I digress. The point is that now I'm worried I'm getting the Chinese Tarzan and our Tarzan that we know and love confused. The point is that you carry a reputation with you in solo queue, and taking away that reputation associated with your username and providing you this level of anonymity can result in people being way more toxic in high elo solo queue than we've seen before. And I think it's a recipe for disaster when high elo solo queue is also the area where there's the most toxicity, because it's the most competitive and people have invested the most amount of time and effort into getting there. So I think that you will see a level of toxicity explode, and I'm worried that toxic players are going to turn on streamer mode in order to abuse a certain level of anonymity, in order to kind of get away with, obviously they could still get banned, but get away with some behavior that will never really be associated with them as a player. And I don't think that that's healthy for the competitive space either, because I would much rather rely on players' intuition about other people that they've ran into in solo queue over and over again, and that, long-term built experience than having nothing to go off of. So I would say that people not having a reputation associated with their username is a really, really dangerous concept to play with. Now, I do want to show you there is a way. So if we go back here and we can look at mine. So that screenshot is from this game here. Let's see. I haven't played a ton too since the last patch, played maybe 20 games. This was just my second to last game. I noticed that happening. So it's not like a crazy cherry-picked example either. I didn't cherry-pick this one because it was too crazy or anything like that. This is going to become the norm, unfortunately, I think, in solo queue. So as you can see here, even though 6 of the 10 people were anonymous, once the game finishes, you can see who they were. So if you encounter a very toxic player, and you might be curious as well who it was or what happened that game, you can see who it was after the game. But I don't think that this is going to be the same as repeatedly seeing toxic things associated with that person's name, or bad gameplay or whatever it is associated with that person's name over and over and over again in game. Right? So for example, if I see this person, let's pretend, and this Viego was not toxic or anything, so forgive me, Viego, but I need an example. Let's say that this Viego was toxic, Electro. Okay, if I see that Viego's toxic, and he's toxic the whole game, but I'm associating it with Viego because I have no idea who the guy is, and then after the game I get to look up and I see one time that his name was Electro, I'm probably not going to remember that Electro was this toxic player. Instead, I'm going to think, one time about it and then forget about it. Or the association is not going to be as strong as seeing in chat, Electro and then this negative message and then Electro and then this negative message like 20, 30 times in game, plus hitting tab and seeing the guy's name. My point here is that even if you can, in this roundabout way, go and check who was being toxic after the game, most people are not going to think to do that. They're not going to remember to do it every time, and they're going to want to move on from a very negative experience to the next game. And even when you do, you're not going to remember or create the negative association with that name in the same way that you would from having seen that name 20, 30 times in game, spamming negative messages and in tab. So I think that that's bad. Another incentive or reason why people might want to hide their name in game is because they're actually worried about the negative association with their gameplay, for example. So imagine you're a player who's getting to Masters for the first time, or getting to Challenger for the first time, like I kind of am. I may want to, for example, hide my name. I'm playing with a kind of a less level of anonymity in the first place to a little bit of an extent, but it may be to my advantage when I get back to Challenger, and hopefully I do get back to Challenger. It might be to my advantage if I wanted to play on a team in the future or something like that to go anonymous, because I don't want people to associate me with only being able to play Braum, or with only or playing the game a certain way, like a certain level of gameplay, because I need to get better as a player. I need to make a lot of improvement as a player, right? So if I get to Challenger for the first time, I'm not going to be as good as when I get to Challenger for the 10th time and I have a lot of experience playing in Challenger games. So I may say, when I first get to Masters, when I first get to GM, when I first get to Challenger, those type of players may want to turn on that anonymous mode so as not to develop a reputation of being a one trick, or of playing the game poorly while they're learning and in the rank for the first time. And so it's kind of an inevitability that when you hit a rank like Challenger or GM or whatever, or Masters for the first time, that you're probably going to struggle a little bit, that there's going to be an adjustment period, that you're at your peak and you may fall back down. You may get demoted. You may get demoted many times before you're able to comfortably play at that rank consistently. And so you're going to have a hard time in the beginning when you get to a new peak and a new rank. And so you may want to go anonymous for those reasons. But again, essentially, to top it all off, or to sum it up, unfortunately, I just think that the new streamer mode is creating a feeling of co-op versus AI in high-elo competitive solo queue games, which is the opposite of how high-elo solo queue games are supposed to feel. It's one of the main fun and positive things about high-elo solo queue is seeing the same names and faces over and over again, and taking that away feels really, really bad and will probably cause people to play less. On top of that, people have direct incentives, such as hiding their champion pool, or not wanting to be associated with one champion only, or not wanting to get looked up in game if you're on a losing streak, or if you're filled. People have a lot of reason why they might want to appear anonymously. for a competitive edge. And so for those reasons, they're going to turn it on. And so if it's optimal for everyone to turn it on, more and more people will keep turning it on. The other thing is like, I don't know, to a certain extent, if you're the only one or one of the few people remaining who's not doing it, you might turn it on just because, well, everyone else has turned it on and given up. So, why would I do something different than what a bunch of people are doing? So, no point trying to hold on to be the last group of people who are remaining not anonymous if everyone's going anonymous. It can lead to toxicity because people aren't getting the same negative reputation associated with their username and their account, and who they are as a person when they flame, because you have no way to know who was flaming until you see one name one time at the end of the game. So I think that those are some really negative incentives, and those are all incentives that affect all of the high elo players, not just streamers. Now, on the streamer side, does streamer mode prevent stream sniping? The answer is no, because stream sniping, we have to define what stream sniping and ghosting are. Stream sniping is when somebody queues up to try to snipe the lobby or get into the lobby of that streamer who they're watching. You cannot use streamer mode to prevent stream sniping, because stream sniping is something that occurs when you're already watching the stream. It's before the match gets made. So streamer mode doesn't take effect until you're in game, or in the loading screen and people could look up who you were. So it doesn't prevent stream sniping, which is one issue. Now on ghosting, it may prevent some casual ghosting where somebody only realizes after they've gotten into game that, hey, I'm in game with Tyler1 because I see his username or a name associated with one of his accounts, or I see, TF Blade or whoever, and so I'm going to, open up their stream and take a look, right? Take a little peek at what's going on in the game. So it can prevent that level of casual ghosting. However, for the biggest streamers, if you were already watching their stream, or especially if you're the type of person who stream sniped their game, you're already going to have their stream open in order to ghost them because you're already trying to get into the same match as them. And you may recognize based on their champions anyways that it's them. So for example, you're playing around the same rank as Tyler1 and you see an Urgot top or you see an Alawi top or something like that. You might look up, you might be able to recognize from the champions and look that up. If you're, so does it prevent stream sniping? No. Does it prevent some ghosting? Yes. But it doesn't prevent all ghosting because it doesn't prevent anyone who is already on the stream from ghosting, and it doesn't prevent anyone who recognizes that could be them and who then opens the stream from ghosting, if they're able to infer correctly who it is. So it prevents some casual ghosting, but it does not prevent people who are like looking at, 10 streams or even just 2 of the main streamers or something like that between their game. They realize they ended up getting into a game with them. Maybe they didn't even try to stream snipe it, but they just get into the game and now they can see it. Really, stream sniping is something that happens when people can see when you queue up, people can see your champion select, and things like that, and when you hit the accept button. And so the best way to prevent stream sniping is for the streamer to just hide champion select and their queue button and their accept button, and to turn the noises off for it. If you can do that as a streamer, you'll prevent stream sniping without necessarily doing that. The other issue though with stream sniping is even if you hide everything, people could still stream snipe if you get out of a game, they knew you got out of a game, and you re-queue right away. So you'll often like delay your queue a little bit, but then that's not great for your stream and for how many games you're getting to play. And even if you delay it a little bit, you're not necessarily going to miss all of the snipers because, queue times in high elo can take a long time anyways. So sometimes if somebody queued up as soon as you got out of a game, they wait 4 minutes for a queue, and then you queue up 3 or 4 minutes later, you could still get into a game with the sniper. Plus, you'd have to do some complicated, like mixing it up when you do it. If you always waited 4 or 5 minutes after a game, people could probably even figure that out. So stream sniping is really cancer, but there's a lot of ways that you can prevent it, on the, for the most part on the streamer side, by just hiding those things. And then when it comes to ghosting is really hard to prevent, right? Because if people know that you're streaming and there's just a lot of people watching Tyler One play, chances are people who get into his game are going to be watching him play without having even stream sniped him or pulled up his stream with the intent to ghost. And I think that's probably the majority of what's happening. So that's really hard to prevent. That's why you use a mini-map cover and things like that, but then that detracts from the ability to follow the game for the people watching the stream, and it doesn't prevent every advantage that you can get from ghosting just by covering the mini-map. You can still see lots of things where people are, especially if you're a jungler. Your position is probably the most important piece of information anyone could glean from ghosting, and so you being on the middle of the screen the whole time is really impossible to avoid. Ghosting that can really negatively impact the game and affect the game. So it's obviously a problem, but I still think that if it doesn't prevent stream sniping and it only prevents some ghosting, is it a solution that's worth destroying the most fun aspect of high elo solo queue, which is knowing who you're playing with and against over and over again, getting rid of the ability for players to have a positive or negative reputation going into playing competitive, and incentivizing everyone to turn it on, even if they're not a streamer. I don't know that those negative aspects of it are worth the slight reduction in ghosting that it's presenting to a handful of streamers. So I wish Riot would really retake a look at this one, because I think that they didn't foresee a lot of these negative consequences. Unfortunately, it's another thing I called right away when they put that in the patch notes, that a lot of people were going to use that and there were going to be a lot of problems with how dead solo queue would feel. I didn't really expect the toxicity problems as well, but I didn't quite know how it was going to roll out and how little you were going to know about the person. But yeah, this is going to be something that Riot really, I think, should potentially take a look at again, and hopefully do something else to reduce ghosting or to to fix these type of problems. There are other things that they could do if they want to improve streamers' lives. I'll give a few basic ideas off the top of my head. Perhaps without making it, not that it's all that tedious, so you can just switch scenes and stuff like that. But perhaps they could make a streamer mode that prevents a lot of stream sniping by making it really easy for streamers to hide their queue up and accept button or something like that, and their timer for when they're queuing up. A streamer mode for the client that would hide those things. I don't necessarily know how it would still be functional, but yeah, something like that would hide those things from the stream or something like that, or from from the client. Those things could be good. Maybe a built-in mini-map cover that, well, again, that's actually kind of difficult because that stuff has to directly go to the broadcast, because I'm thinking you wouldn't be able to see the queue up button. You wouldn't be able to see your own mini-map if there was a mini-map cover built into the game. So, maybe that idea is cooked, but basically building in some of these features that streamers are having to implement themselves and making them a little bit easier on the streamer end, in ways like that, rather than focusing on this aspect of ghosting, may be a good idea. Maybe there's just not a great solution, but it's just not worth the trade-off on the end of what's happening here. So, hopefully Riot takes a look at it and goes back and makes a decision, but we'll see what happens. Until then, good luck with your co-op versus AI games, and have a wonderful day.